All right. Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to MCDM's Arcadia Q&A live stream. If you're unfamiliar with our live streams, this is where we get the great people together who make the Arcadia magazine from MCDM, our 5th edition magazine that comes out every month, delivered through Patreon and our store, and we talk about the creations that are within there. And with me right now is one of our amazing editors and authors for issue 11, Sadie Lowry. Sadie, introduce yourself, let people know who you are and what you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sadie Lowry. You might remember me from issue number 1. I am a writer, designer, editor. I edit Arcadia as well as Kingdoms and Warfare. And I am a writer on Arcadia, the upcoming Critical Role book called The Netherdeep, as some other awesome things. So, you can find me on Twitter at Incandescent. I still haven't changed that.
That's awesome. Well, it's great to have you here because you are part of the DNA, not just of the Arcadia number 1 and Arcadia 11, which you have articles that you have authored in, but also of many Arcadia issues because you do serve as one of our editors. So pretty much every month you are working on something. Not pretty much, every single month.
Yeah, I've probably touched it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the magic that you love is thanks to Sadie, and also I can see in the chat, thanks to Hannah Rose, who is another one of our amazing Arcadia editors. So Sadie, let's talk about you and sort of your journey a little bit in the RPG world. For people who don't know, how did you get to this place where you are writing and editing for Arcadia and working with Critical Role and Wizards of the Coast? How did all of this come about?
Wow, that's crazy to summarize, even though it's been like 2 years. I started with the Write Your First Adventure workshop in November 2019. And after publishing that and in meeting the Eberron community and meeting the creator community, I started collaborating with a lot of people in a few months. I had contributed to Encounters in the Savage Underdark by Jeff Stevens, The Adventurer's Domestic Handbook with Lydia Van Hoy, and a few others. And it just sort of snowballed from there. From there, I went to work on Darkhold Secrets of the Zentarum. That's where I met you. And from there... and Amber Litke and I published also Deathless Skies of Sire, and that was what sort of that adventure is actually what I gave to Joey Hake when he was looking for writers for Call of the Netherdeep, and so it sort of snowballed, like, because I met you on Darkhold. You asked if I could pitch to Arcadia, and then I did. Joey brought me on to Call of the Netherdeep, and it's just been wild from there.
Yeah, you have definitely put in a lot of work over the last year and a half, 2 years, 3 years. I don't know how long it's been. It all blends together. But it's been a long time coming that you are creating all of this great stuff. And it's now finally all getting out there into the world because all of this stuff happens months and months beforehand, sometimes even a year or more beforehand.
Yeah.
So... it's really great to have you to be able to talk to you today about Angelic Ancestries. So this is the article you wrote for Arcadia 11. Now, walk us through it, right? We probably have people who are watching right now who have not seen your article, who maybe never picked up an issue of Arcadia before. So tell me, what is Angelic Ancestries?
Angelic Ancestries is... So I love playing Aasimar. They are my favorite character option to play. I have so many Aasimar characters. And when you make as many Aasimar characters as I do, the 3 options begin to feel a little bit limiting. And so one of the things that I wanted to pitch to Arcadia early on was expanding the Angelic character options available, and focusing a little more on the role play opportunities that sort of comes with being a character tied to the celestial realms. And so I pitched it. I was so thrilled when you wanted to go through with it, because I was writing this article for you, but I was also writing this article for me. And getting to put something that I loved so much into something that was so play tested and given so much care was just the best. So the article introduces 4 new angelic options. They are the God Singer, which is sort of a hymnal music based option. The Thonic Scion, which is a farrier, think River Styx, the carrier of souls. The Primordial Scions, which deal with things like fate, time, gravity, all those intrinsic things that are natural to this world. And then the Vindicator Scions, which are basically Heaven's bounty hunters.
Yeah, they are really cool, and I think each sub race, right, has its own distinct flavor and story that goes with it, that I think sort of no matter what sort of character you want to play, you can find a scion that will help tell the story of that character and fit into that character. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you think makes them exciting to play. And I think a lot of people are seeing, I can see already in chat, making the association with Aasimar. I'm wondering if you can talk to me a little bit about their relationship to Aasimar and also some of the differences maybe that you see.
Yeah, absolutely. So Aasimar are not in the OGL. And so if they had been in the OGL, this would have been 4 new Aasimar options, but they aren't. And so that gave us a fun opportunity to explore what would make them different. They are meant to not replace Aasimar necessarily, but to go hand in hand with them. Or replace them. I don't tell you what to do. But they... for example, I never liked the idea that Aasimar are just, human-like creatures who sometimes manifest wings. So they all have a little bit more physical indicators of their celestial heritage. They can also be based in any they can be you can have a Genasi Aasimar, you can have a Dragonborn Scion, you can have a Dragonborn Scion, you can have an Elf Scion. Like, I don't want to limit you to what your character looks like on the outside, because having celestial blood to me shouldn't indicate what you look like.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. I think to go back to your first question, I think what to me makes them exciting to play, I always felt that Aasimar and now Scions have sort of an intrinsic roleplay potential. When you are connected to a higher realm, you have there's responsibilities or roleplay opportunities that come with that, and I really wanted to explore that. And I wanted that relationship to manifest differently depending on the Scion. I have 2 Aasimar characters, for example, and I've loved playing with the relationship they have with their sort of angelic progenitor. I have a Twilight cleric, protector Aasimar, who her Deva has had the service of warriors and champions, and now she the last of her line is this little farm girl, and she's like, I don't know what to do with you. You were just a farm girl, and my character is like, I am trying my best. I don't know what you want from me. I am just a farm girl. But meanwhile, I had a fallen Aasimar Echo Knight, who basically, I went to the DM and I said, I want his Deva to not be his Deva. I want someone to be pretending to be his Deva, and basically nudging him in the wrong paths, and for that to cause tension until he finds his real connection. And that's what's exciting about Scions and Aasimar to me, is that there's a sense of duty and an intrinsic roleplay connection. So for the Scions, you have the Thonic Scions that automatically have this thread of like, well, why can they touch souls? Why are they the only ones who can touch souls? With the Vindicators, you have this immediate like, well, are you always going to be right? Is it always going to be, right to hunt down the people you're hunting? Is that, or like with the Primordials, you have a question of fate. Like, is it okay to be toying with fate like this? And can you ever go too far? Can you change fate? And I think that's what makes them so exciting, is that like you're playing with massive scale forces, whether that be fate or angels, and it's immediately exciting on the offset.
That's great. And clearly you do have a love of angels, right? In Arcadia 1, you
Yes.
wrote a bunch of super powerful angels that can be used sort of as campaign end bosses, if you want them to be, or world-shattering figures that exist, which is really cool. So it was great to see this tread continue and bring some of that angel love for players to be able to have. But also in this article, you did include then 2 Scion NPCs, a little less powerful than Uquaviel, but none the same, still very cool and very interesting. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about both of those NPCs as well.
Sure. I wanted to write them to be good examples of how you could both be a Scion PC, but also how DMs could integrate Scions into their world and sort of play with these natural plot hooks and questions that come up. So, for example, Riven is my favorite. I adore him. He's my son, but he's a Chthonic Scion who has this like soul that has been tainted, and so he can't help it pass on to the afterlife because he's not sure if it will go to heaven or hell or somewhere completely random, because like it's not right, and so he has to fix it, and you get to help him fix it, and I wanted to leave a lot of potential for what was wrong with it and how it can be fixed, because I think that's where the fun is. I don't want to tell you, the DM, what the answer is. I want you to play with souls in your world and how they could be tainted and how you could fix them. And the other one was Zindri. I should have my own article open.
Yes, Zindri.
I wanted to play with sort of that tension of, can you be a celestial bounty hunter who is wrong? And so I set her against Vivienne. So one is a Vindicator son. Primordial? Vindicator? One is one and one is the other.
Yes, Zindri, I do have the article open, so I'm cheating. You should know that Sadie wrote this months ago.
Yes.
But yes, Zindri is a Vindicator Scion. And Riven is a Chthonic Scion.
Yes. So I wanted to play with that tension in having Zindri basically hunt down Vivienne, who is another Scion, but is Vivienne right? Is Zindri right? Are they both right or wrong? And I thought that would be a great way to show DMs the stories that you can have with these, that someone might be misguided or not necessarily correct, or and they might all have the best intentions, but these tensions can come to a head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is great, right? And it reminded me a lot of, there are many stories where there is a protagonist running from an antagonist, and the antagonist isn't necessarily evil, but they're wrong, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like your Les Mis Javert style character who is going after someone and just has sort of these absolute views and that sort of thing. So Zindri is definitely going to make an appearance in my campaign at some point. So I'm very excited for her to show up and make a... Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, creating the mechanics for these things. So what are the sorts of abilities that you get if you have a Scion character, right? Obviously, you have these cool wings that show up sometimes when you're doing cool stuff, but you've also got a lot of abilities here that are themed around those different things that each Scion can do. And I would say, unlike Aasimar, right, Aasimar sort of have things that they can do, and then, you know, their various sub-ancestries can each do some. The sub-ancestry you pick here, in a big way, I feel like, mechanically and story-wise, defines your, you know, the sort of Scion and character you are.
Yeah. And that was very purposeful. I really wanted each one to have a very strong identity. I'm delighted that you say that. I wanted the God Singers. I feel in the way that in various cultures that we connect with each other through music, and in how communal hymn singing and just music in general, even aside from hymns, music is very communal. And so, you know, for example, for the God Singer, I wanted it to be very utility based. I wanted you to be able to benefit your allies and not necessarily be strengthening yourself. I wanted it to be something that, you know, you were there to help your allies. And so, and also, I did want this one to be more utility based. So you have an ability where creatures can understand you no matter what languages you speak for 10 minutes to sort of cross any linguistic boundaries. You have your transformation. You let someone else deal extra radiant damage instead of you, and you also give people temporary hit points. So it's very much not about empowering yourself, it's about empowering other people. The Thonic Scion actually, James, ended up being my favorite despite how much we went back and forth on those abilities. That one was tough, but I loved it. What we ended up doing, we had this complicated fiddly. James was perfect, but I had this complicated fiddly bad ritual.
Far from it.
Where you could release a soul to get a boon, or you could do something else, and it was fiddly, and it kind of took away, I think, from how I wanted this to be very roleplay centric, and I wanted it to really make sure that the souls that these Scions were harvesting were being respected. I didn't want it to be just something mechanical, so we ended up replacing it for sort of a weaker speak with dead, where the Thonic Scion can ask a soul 3 questions, which I think is pretty cool. And you can also again, this one is also very utility based. It's not very combat based. You can also automatically help an ally succeed on a death saving throw. So kind of playing into that very solemn respecters of souls and helping people. The primordial I actually leaned a lot into Dunamancy, like Graviturgy, and I'm blanking on the other one. You know what I'm talking about. Graviturgy,
yeah,
and
Chronomancy.
Chronergy.
Right?
Chronergy, yeah. So you can manipulate gravity, and you can, no, we didn't do the replace. You can have someone reroll its damage dice. Yeah, we have reiterated this many times. You can have someone reroll their damage dice to try to get them a bigger hit, which I think is really cool. And then the Vindicator, I wanted you to have things that would help you hunt people down. And so I think these mechanics are really cool. It's kind of like that spell, Mind Spike. Is that the one? Mm-hmm. Where you can sort of implement someone with a beacon of light, and then you always know where they are. And then you also have a sort of combat-like action in which you you can restrain people, and you deal extra radiant damage against anyone who is, well, no, against anyone, but yeah, the idea is very much to help hunt people down. And so I really like. I think that if you were to compare them to 5e Aasimar, I don't think they have as many combat benefits, but I'm okay with that because they have so many cool. They have so many cool utility and story functions.
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the fun things about the Scions is I feel like you did, I should say, delve deep into the story of each, and we have we've got a really rich article here, and I'm really excited about it because we haven't done that many Ancestries in Arcadia, right? We had one from Justice Arman, who we're going to hear from later on this stream, and you are the second Ancestries article. Yeah, exactly. So it's really great to be able to have this and have something that's really flavorful and going to help players and GMs bring more story to the forefront with these characters that are Scions. And I know you said they're not necessarily meant to replace Aasimar, but they have replaced Aasimar, both in my heart and in my campaign. Yes! So I'm very excited, to use them. Let's talk a little bit about your editing on Arcadia, because you have been working editing a lot of stuff, including articles in this very issue. You don't edit your own article. That's Hannah has done that. We often switch off if one of you has written a piece. Yeah. The other one will write something. But as far as editing goes, sort of to give people a little peek behind the scenes of the process, I work with the author on the article a little bit, and then the author and I work together with playtesters, and then the author will step back and the editor and I will work together on the article as well. And it's an interesting process because all of that happens very quickly, right? We're putting out a magazine once a month, and so it has to happen fast, and sometimes we get articles that are longer, and obviously those take longer just by nature of the number of words that they have, or sometimes they have a new concept in them, and we need to bring that concept to the forefront, right? Like, it'll be mechanically sound, but now we need to explain it really well. And I feel like one of the big things that you and Hannah both help me do is that by the time I am there, the author and I have been in it for a while, the playtesters have been in it for a while, and now it's like, here's a pair of fresh, expert eyes from someone who does this all the time, who's really good at it, and so you're helping us not only with spelling and grammar and all of the things people expect editors to do, but also see the forest through the trees a little bit. How do you see your role with Arcadia?
I do see it very, very similar to that. Sort of the last fresh eyes, making sure that everything is cohesive and clear. It's always fun to go through an article and catch something that you're like, that's from a very old iteration. That has to be something that accidentally slipped through. But no, I see my role with Arcadia as being just taking all these cobbled ideas, like taking the author's words and your feedback and the playtester's feedback, and making them cohesive, cleaning all the extra bits up, and then making sure that the themes, the story, the mechanics, and everything that has been developed now really shines through. So is it clear? Is it consistent? Is it cohesive? And does it have impact? If the idea changed from A to B, then now at step C, I'm going to develop the language of that idea a little bit more so that it really shines, it really stands out. I think editing is always sort of a spit shine. But I think that in Arcadia that's extra true because you have so many hands in the pie. And so you just want to make sure that everything is one big vision.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think a big part of that happens is like, sort of the bringing out of that individual author's voice, right? Because we want to make sure that that author is happy. It's their name on the byline, right? It's their words. And so we're very careful not to do things like take a core assumption or even something the author feels passionate about and strike it for space or, for anything like that. But I do think a big part of that final process is like, kind of like when you're uncovering dinosaur bones, right? This is a metaphor everybody can get behind, I'm sure. Like bringing them out and making sure that we can see the T-Rex that is truly under there and that it doesn't look like a brontosaurus or that sort of thing, or an amorphous lump of rocks.
My archaeologist husband would appreciate that metaphor.
Oh. Wow, I want to talk to your husband about archaeology, but not now, because I want to ask you first. Yeah. What do you think as far as editing versus authoring goes? How many of those skills go hand in hand, and where do you think the differences come from?
Goodness gracious. So we talk all the time about, like Hannah and I, about how writing and editing really use two different brains. And I think that they overlap a lot, but, I write sentences as a writer that I would, if I saw those as an editor, I would go, why did I do that? And I see writing as you want to focus on the big picture. And you want to focus on making sure that everything that is in your head is conveyed in a strong sense. I don't try to zoom in on the sentences. I mean, I do, because I want the sentences to have impact, but I don't want to sit there and fiddle with word choice until I die. Because the big priority is that when Hannah gets my manuscript, she knows what my intention is, and she knows the theme, the mood, the atmosphere that I'm going for. And then with that, with my big story and my intentions conveyed to her, then she can take that and she can go, okay, I see what Sadie's doing here. Now, how do I convey these ideas in the cleanest, smoothest, tightest, most flowing way possible? And I think that's kind of where the differences come from. I see writing as I lost that metaphor. I'm not going to try to chase it, but I think the ways that they overlap are, the intent in finding the best words to say what you want to say, or in shaping, in shaping the overall shape of the manuscript. But there's, I'm sorry, I live this so much, and so it's hard
no,
to
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, and you're describing it perfectly from my point of view, right? That writing is often about you're driving the boat, and you're like, hey, this is where we're going, this is where we're headed, this is what we're doing. But then editing comes in and says, okay, let's make this the best we can, right? Like, let's make sure your idea is strong. You said this, and I think this might be better, right? I think one of the biggest things I often see from you in particular is like, hey, this word that you're using here could be better if you used this word, right? And it's like, wow, not only did that make this stronger, this sentence stronger, it makes the whole idea come across in a way that is far more what the author intended and that kind of thing. So I think those are the sorts of decisions that you are making that are improving things, including then other times saying like, because you are a designer as well, you're able to look at a game mechanic and say like, hey, we said this in prose earlier, but this mechanic doesn't really reflect what we're saying here in prose. Which is right? Right? And oftentimes I'll say, oh, that's a good point. I think it's this, or let me go back to the author, and I will let you know which one of these is right. So that sort of thing is just super, super helpful and incredible, and it is something that you can see as an editor, but then you can also do in your own writing. And I love the idea that they're two different brains, because I think that's 100% true. There are things that I fix all the time in editing that then I do as a writer too. I make those same mistakes.
Yes. Yeah. It really is. Like, sometimes people will be like, Sadie, you use that word like twice in one sentence back to back. And it's like, come on. That's like editing 101 is don't repeat words. But when you're writing, you're not thinking about, the exact word choice, because you're thinking about the bigger picture and really making sure that comes through. And then you can go through on an editing pass and go, oh, I totally used two different words there. And with Arcadia, the example that you mentioned where the mechanics and the prose don't match, I think that comes through a lot because of how the mechanics change through playtesting. And so it's one of the things I think that Hannah and I really look for is, okay, these mechanics have been honed. Now, does the prose match?
Yeah, absolutely. And that does happen more often than I'd care to admit, which is why I'm so grateful to you and to Hannah. One of the many, many reasons that I am so grateful to both of you. So, Sadie, we are running up on time here, but before we go, yes. What's going on? Like, what are you excited about that's coming out that you can talk about? Where can people find you on the internet?
Yes. Okay, you can find me on Twitter at incandescent. It is the word incandescent with an A stuck in it. But things that are coming out that I'm excited about. Well, Call of the Netherdeep is coming out in March. That is Critical Role and Wizards of the Coast's first adventure book, and I was a writer on that, and I think it is pretty cool. You should check it out. Tal'Dorei Reborn, I did some playtesting on. That's coming out in under 2 weeks. Our very own Hannah Rose was a lead on that, and she did incredible. And from what I've seen in the playtesting, it is so good. And then I have some other stuff that's coming down the line this year that I can't talk about yet. So follow me on Twitter and you'll find out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just say keep your eyes on Arcadia, because you probably see Sadie's name continue to pop up, not just in the editor section, but in the designer section as well. So I'm very excited for what we have cooking. The people are, it's going to blow some minds. So yeah, it'll be great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Sadie. I really appreciate it. And I always love talking with you.
I love talking to you too. Thank you for having me. Tell Justice I said hi and he's the best.
I will let him know. Justice! How's it going? Hello. It's good to see you. I have a message from our previous guest, Sadie, for you. You are the best. Was the message, and she says hi. So I'm just delivering that before I forget to do it, honestly. Everybody, this is Justice, one of our Arcadia authors in Arcadia 11 and also in Arcadia 3, has an article called The Dreamkin that you might remember. Justice, for people who don't know out there, who are you? What do you do in tabletop role-playing games? And how'd you get your start?
Well, my name is Justice. I am predominantly a writer, designer. I started on the DM's Guild like a lot of us. I've written with Sadie and many other wonderful writers who have been featured on Arcadia. And now I am a full-time goblin, which is a real title, at Beetle and Grimm's, where I help make awesome box sets and then do lots of freelancing on the side because I'm a masochist and I enjoy this.
I can only imagine that your LinkedIn profile must be very confusing to recruiters when they come across you. They're like, "Goblin, what does this mean?"
Yeah. And all the
What
healthcare
does that
stuff on
mean?
there.
Yeah, exactly. What does full time Goblin mean? What are you doing over there at Beetle and Grimm?
Yeah, so I'm a producer. So usually I am coordinating pretty much from inception of cool D&D or Critical Role or Pathfinder book that we receive. I'm involved from the start of thinking about what goes into that box, all the way to working with vendors and artists and writing bonus encounters and letters and things like that to make sure that everything goes out the door according to plan, hopefully on time when the shipping crisis is a little bit more calm. And thinking about what we're doing in the future. So it's a really cool job. I like it because it's you get to see so many aspects of the creative process as opposed to just writing, which I also really enjoy. But it's cool to watch something physical get made that showed up in writing. Whether that's a magic item or a letter or a map. It's really neat.
Yeah, that's amazing. The work you're doing over there is really cool. It's really immersive. It's helping out GMs all over the place. And you're helping out GMs all over the place with Arcadia 11. See that transition? Boom. Brought it back. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us about your article, Good Fences Make Good Neighbors. We have people watching who maybe have never even picked up an issue of Arcadia before, let alone Arcadia 11. So tell me a little bit about Good Fences Make Good Neighbors. What's inside? Why do people want to use it for their games?
Yeah, so a long time ago, it feels in the pandemic, probably like 10 years ago in pandemic years, we worked on a supplement called Darkhold Secrets of the Zentari. And in that, got to detail all kinds of dastardly characters. And while I was helping and co-leading that with Anthony Joyce, Sadie was on that supplement as well, and Gabe and Celeste Konowich, some names y'all might be familiar with through Arcadia. I had the idea of fences, and it was way too late in the process to do anything with it. So I kind of had this idea on the back burner because there are so many awesome characters who are fences in video games and movies. I mean, you have like Resident Evil, like the "what are you buying and what are you selling" guy. You have like Red Dead Redemption. There are the fences who work as like traders. I think even if you go like all the way back to like Majora's Mask, there's somebody who will buy off like stolen jewelry and things. So the idea of putting mechanics out there for selling stolen items. I mean, rogues steal things so often. I feel like every new player tries to steal something eventually when they see the glittering ruby or something on somebody's wrist or in their room in games like Skyrim. And I wanted to have mechanics for what it's like to actually steal and sell one-of-a-kind pieces or magic items, and how that could potentially blow up in the character's face or add complications to a story to make it more interesting. And then I wanted to give some examples of fences that DMs would not have to think about inventories that they might have or what they specialize in, that it's just kind of all there. So if you need an NPC and somebody is working with the Thieves Guild, they can just go to this person and it's all ready for the GM to use.
Yeah, that sort of thing is just super helpful to have, right? And it's wonderful because so many of the items that we find as adventurers may or may not be hot, as it were, right? Like if you go and kick some bandit butt, and then you take all of those things that those bandits have and you start selling them for yourself. Well, you're taking stolen goods and you're selling them and distributing them to people, right? Who knows what within a dragon's treasure hoard is still, maybe it's something the dragons stole recently and not 3 centuries ago, that sort of thing. And so to have these rules, and then also to have the fences there that you can drop in that are willing to buy these stolen goods, I think is great on many levels, not just if, hey, maybe you're stealing something from a corrupt lord and you want to sell that as well, right? Which I think is also great. We often find ourselves as shall we say, noble thieves in a Dungeons and Dragons game as well. Have you found that your players often are dealing with stolen goods or desiring offense, maybe want to buy something on the black market for themselves?
Yeah, we played in Baldur's Gate for a long time, which is kind of like, a more seedy city. And in that town or that city, pretty much any merchant could be a fence. There's always those times where you see the goods, the characters maybe are like, what else you got? And you can have that NPC say something like, oh, do you want to see the back room? That's sort of like you're a thief dealing with somebody who probably is also a thief. There's always that situation where the characters want to know more. My table, we usually have at least one person playing a rogue or somebody a little bit more scoundrelly at any given time. So the stolen items do come up pretty frequently. As far as like I reserve it more for like those set piece items. So, I mean, you could use it for like 1d4 art objects, whatever that even means. But I like reserving it for that kind of one-of-a-kind thing that draws the character's eyes, or that magic item or the MacGuffin that they're looking for, just adding that sort of complication to somebody that's on your tail, but maybe is not the main focus of the adventure. I don't think I answered your question, but hopefully I talked long enough.
No, I think you did, right? The question was about, like, do you use these things in your game? And I think it's cool to know that, right, there is this desire out there, and I think there is a big desire to use. On top of that, you've also sprinkled in some stuff in this article that maybe doesn't make an appearance in the main game that often, right? You've got rules for firearms in here, which I think is really great. You've got a tiny gnome. You've got all kinds of good stuff. So did you see this article as also a chance to like sneak in some other things you wanted to work with?
Yeah, I enjoy the heat rules, but I know that and Arcadia is very much, you go to this magazine and there's cool shit in here. I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't say shit. But
no, you can say shit. That's fine.
Okay, I can say shit. Where you can find cool things, but I know that necessarily not every time is everything in an article going to be useful to you. So I wanted to kind of the article is almost like 2 in 1. Like the fences are a natural result of the heat complications, but you can use the fences without doing any of the heat system if it's not your fancy. So when I was designing the fences, I wanted to bring some things that were interesting, some things that felt different. So yeah, I very much snuck things in there and trying to put some links between other writers like Willie. You have Madam Wheatwood, who owns this rock bottom ranch, and there's a lot of opportunities there to use Willie's rules in jumping on mounted combat. And then you have cool things like candy. Like, who doesn't love candy and food and things that don't get featured a lot in a lot of written adventures, but food is so interesting and so vibrant and colorful that it just adds more to your games, and it's a lot of fun. And who doesn't want to poison somebody with a gummy manticore one day? Like, that's my dream.
Yes, absolutely, right? And it's great to see, because I think we're looking at an article about items that might be illegal or stolen or that sort of thing, and you see candy and you think, what? How does this factor in? But then when you actually read the description of everything, you see, oh, I see why this is illegal and not something a person would want necessarily sold in their town or that kind of thing, which is great. I think one of the things that I would love to chat with you about, getting a little more in depth, are these NPCs, right? So we have these 3 fence NPCs that you had mentioned earlier. Do you have a favorite? And if so, why is that one your favorite?
That is really tough.
Breaking
I would.
the rules of asking about favorites, by the way.
Yeah,
Realize that
yeah.
I'm doing
You
here.
know, and especially after seeing the artwork, it made it even more challenging because who doesn't love a gummy aboleth like on a 1 foot tall
Yeah.
gnome? But I think my favorite of the three has to be Madam Wheatwood. You know, so often in tabletop do we see the old, frail male wizard who isn't very physically active, who can cast a spell but spends his time in books, who, all of that. But Madam Wheatwood is such a badass. I think, like, she challenges the perspectives of being fit in old age. She deals with these animals. She's like tough as steel, and it's just cool. The idea of like an older ranch hand, especially like I live in Texas. I don't, and it's not by choice, but the idea of like an older ranch hand who's just been hardened by their work, you got to think like, how would that be in a world where there are manticores and giant bats and lizards and stuff, and how much of a badass this woman must be. And so for her to kind of use the ruse of this sweet old lady, you probably, when you first meet her, she's like everybody's grandma. She has that tin of candy somewhere that has been reused, that you open it up, you're hoping for cookies or something, and there's like knitting needles or something inside it. But then when you know her, she drops this guise, has this chain smoker voice, and is like, come out to the ranch. And even in the artwork, she's got like a big ass falcon on her arm. She just seems like she can go toe to toe with any adventurer. So she is my favorite.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about these heat rules, right? So heat is sort of this representation of other people wanting the thing that you have, or wanting you because of the thing that you have, right? And you can gain and you can lose heat based on how desired or illegal the item may be, but also based on the actions that the characters take. And then you get into these complications, right? And I'm wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about each, not every single one in detail necessarily, but the heat complications that we have here. And just give people a taste of like what could happen to them if they rack up, let's say, a lot of heat.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different ways to get heat. Each one of these is kind of inspired by either a piece of media I've seen or just common sense. There's an old cartoon I watched once. I can't remember what it was, but there's a character who steals a one of a kind piece and tries to sell it on like the black market, and ends up like in this mobster's house because it was so recognizable that they knew he stole it because it went missing recently. So there's one for appearance. There's things that are hard to conceal, something that's glowing or big, something with magic that's just going to draw the attention of anybody who's looking for magical things. Notoriety of, if it's something that somebody else is looking for that's not just the authorities. And so when you have all these things, they each carry a value. And that allows the DM to roll on this heat complications table. Now, you can do that, at your discretion, or you can do it like if the characters do something more that would have gained a certain amount of heat or something. And so the different complications vary because you're going to roll on this D100 table, and you're going to add to that the heat level of this infamous item that you have. And so if you roll low, you're good. You might have no complication. But the higher you roll, the worse things happen. And so obviously, if you have something that's hotter, it has more points on it, you're going to roll higher. And some values, if you have such a specific magical, close to authorities item, you're already going to jump up a level when you roll if you get above a 50. So you have things like a close call. And some of these are formatted. I was inspired by a book that you wrote on for Waterdeep city encounters, where you can have a roll table and then a smaller one within it, so you still have that variety. So maybe somebody nosy catches a glimpse of the item, or a street urchin tries to steal it off the characters, and suddenly this thing you're trying to hide is out in the open in a crowded market and might draw somebody else's attention. You have a checkpoint, and a checkpoint could look like a lot of things. You could have, a pack of gnolls laughing it up outside the dungeon, or maybe it's something specific as a group of guards, like checking every caravan that comes through. Each one of these has kind of different ways that you can resolve it, depending on the GM. You could bribe the guards. You could take a beating, get a nice flogging. You could just go into combat with them, or surrender the item itself and have it confiscated. Now, you can roll high enough that something happens that's called a catastrophe. So this is like the worst thing that could possibly happen of you having this item. And sometimes it might be something you might not think the item that you have is that important, but somebody you really don't want to wants that item. So if you roll a d6 on this catastrophe table, you can get something like an Ifriti who wants this item for its palace. You could have an adult red dragon that wants this specific piece for its horde, a lich who wants to use it as a vessel for their souls, or even something like a planetar, this powerful angel descending and saying, oh, this is actually, a relic, or my god needs this item for some sort of divine quest, and you must give it to me. And there's all kinds of cool situations that can arise from those that aren't just combat, or could even develop like a new side villain for your campaign, depending on what level you're at.
That's incredible. It's really fun to be able to have these things as a GM, even just to drop on your players. This is a great, your players have caused trouble table, and now what trouble comes to find them, right? You can even use it that broadly, I find, in your games often, that you've attracted the wrong kind of attention. Let's see how bad the attention you've attracted really is. And so I, in fact, was doing this the other day in my game I was like, something needs to happen because of who the players have pissed off. But I don't know what exactly it should be. And then I remembered this article, and I went and I found it out, and I rolled on the table, and I looked at some options, and I was like, oh yeah, I can adapt this a little bit and make it work. And so that was really great to be able to have those options right at my fingertips, and even be able to adapt them for something else.
That's awesome. That's like the highest compliment to hear somebody else use something you wrote. Like that's what designers want to hear, right? Is I used this thing that you wrote. You're like, oh my gosh, like somebody did something with it. Oh my, that's awesome. I'm glad you were able to make it work at your table. That's really cool. Thank you for telling me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is. I agree with you 100%. When someone says to you, I'm actually using this thing, that is great. We also appreciate people who read and love, but the idea that somebody liked your thing enough to use it to play is huge, especially because there's so many things out there. You could run games until the end of time and not touch most of it, right? To be chosen like that is a huge honor. So thank you, because I know you've run stuff of mine as well, and I love running stuff of yours. I think it's great.
Likewise.
So let's talk a little bit about stuff that you might have upcoming. Anything interesting that you can talk about at this moment? If not, I would say you can spill the beans on maybe anything that you might have future upcoming and a little Arcadia's stuff maybe you're working on at the moment.
So there will be a joint article that I'm working on with a very good friend and long-standing partner of mine, Mr. Anthony Joyce, that I'm very excited about. We were just talking about on a phone call this morning. And then everything else is sadly stuck in NDA land. But I can tell you that some exciting things will be announced hopefully here in the next couple of months.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about you. because so first of all, Anthony Joyce, great author, Defend Your Gobbo Cave in the Arcadia issue just before this one, Arcadia 10. People should definitely go check that out. Anthony is one of the greats, just like you, my friend, are one of the greats. But I also want to talk to you a little bit about an incident that may or may not have happened on this very YouTube channel.
No.
So you are a member of Dusk. You play in Matt's Dusk campaign. Co,
Yes.
great character, by the way. Love
Thank
Co.
you.
Tell people a little bit about Dusk and who Co is. And
Yeah,
we
so
won't spoil anything that may or may not happen to Co. But I just,
yeah.
if you just want to tell people out there, give them a taste if they want to check out Dusk.
Yeah, so Dusk is super awesome. It is with Dale, Anna, Tom, OD, and me. I hope I didn't leave anybody off. If I feel bad, and of course Jerry, who is putting everything together all the time for the YouTube channel and cutting our sessions down to digestible format, which is awesome. It's DM by Matt, which is really cool for me. You know, as somebody who first discovered Matt through running the game videos, to see those in practice as one of his players is really interesting. And it's cool. I play Co. Co is a barrow man who's sort of like a Goliath. And he is very Persian coded. We like to say that Co has Baba energy. Baba means like dad in Farsi. So he's very much a dad. He's big. He likes to cook. He wields a Persian meal club, which is basically like a big fat baseball bat that's normally used by these Zorkhane warriors in Iran, that they just use it for exercising because it's so heavy and they don't swing them around. So the fact that Co can lift one up and wield it with one hand is pretty devastating. And I think there's been some good crits that show that Co is pretty jacked. He has a mustache. I love mustaches. I love characters with beards and mustaches, and he's a little bit older. So it's been a lot of fun to play in that game. It's 4E. So if you've ever been curious about 4E, or you've heard Matt talk about like minion rules or some of the movement and whatever non-Euclidean means, you can learn about that on those videos and see them in practice. And it's been really cool. You know, as a designer, it's very interesting. I think that designers should play board games. They should play other systems. They should experience them, because even if you like writing for D&D the most, it will make you a better designer. You'll get to relate with more people. You'll get ideas from the way things work. And, you know, no tabletop game is perfect. So they're always changing. So you might find something you really like from another game and bring it into a different tabletop, because the best thing about tabletop is they are all customizable. It's not a video game. You can hack that however you want. And it's been really cool to play 4E and through Fantasy Grounds, which is my first time using Fantasy Grounds.
Is it your first time playing 4E?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so that was part of when Matt asked me. It was like, have I ever played it before? I think he wanted at least a couple people who didn't have any experience with it. And so there's been a lot of times where he'll explain how a feature works. Like the powers are really interesting. Like an encounter power is really dope. It makes a lot of sense. It removes some of the balancing issues. It's like you do this fight and you get this thing back every time. So I think a lot of us as gamers, you play like a Fallout and you have a bag filled with 80 stim packs because you're like, oh, I don't want to use it right now. I might need it for the end. So you get to the boss in D&D and you just alpha strike everything that you've been saving for the boss. But the way that 4E is set up, it kind of encourages you to use some of those mid-tier powers every encounter. So you get to see, you get to do dope stuff with them. So.
Yeah, that's cool. It is very cool to watch Dusk and see everybody discover how 4E is different. And I think across the editions of D&D, it's one of the most different, right? For better or for worse, whatever your 4E opinions may be. I know that I am a fan of the game. It's in fact of the things that attracted me to working with MCDM. And
Cool.
it is just really fun to watch a group of people embrace that edition, as well as, knowing that you also love the current edition of the game as well, which is wonderful to see. I have a question for you. You dived in. Oh, is a monk. And in 4E, monk is considered like one of the more complicated classes, right? It doesn't show up until player's handbook 3.
Believe that now.
Did you feel like there was more of a learning curve because of the class you had picked?
I think somewhat. Like, I'll be honest. Like, it's interesting because one of my first characters that I played in D&D period was a monk. That was like when things started to sort of click for me in 3rd edition. Though I'll confess to my first GM, shout out to Colin. I would just ask Colin, "Hey, there are 1,000 feats here. What do I do?" And he's like, "You should take flying kick." And I would take flying kick. And there was like this min-max player in our group who's like, the character was modeled after Guts, that anime guy. So he's like got 2 monkey grip feet, great swords, swinging, doing like 100 damage or whatever. And then I'm like, flying kick, and I deal like 8 damage. So whenever I went into 4E, I it's harder to find guides on 4E, but I looked up a few things. It's like, just to avoid some really incompatible build or anything. And I'm not somebody who really like puts a lot of work into my build or really enjoys it. I kind of lead more through, does this make sense for the character? But Matt was generous enough to say, like, if you do something and you don't like the way it feels out, like, you can change it. So early on, I had like a dragon's tail movement, and I replaced that for the crane's wings, which became Simorg's wings. And I use that all the freaking time. I basically just fly half the time on that game. So, but yeah, it was a little challenging at first, but I think it's not as challenging as, say, like Zoga, who is, almost support and has to rely on like knowing what the party does and when they do their actions. I think that's a little bit more difficult. So if you're thinking about playing it and you want to play it, you should jump in, and it's not that hard.
Yeah, it's great. It is a super fun addition to the game, and especially, I think, like you said, it's a great way to engage your game designer brain. And one thing that I've found, too, is the more games you learn, the faster you become at picking up new games, too, right? Like, you probably learning your first RPG, you had to learn, like, the concept of what an RPG is, in addition to the rules and everything. Your next game, you won't need to learn what the concept is, so you'll already pick it up faster, and so forth. So it's interesting to see. I think
that's good. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I think that's good.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm trying to get my sister's been really interested in playing tabletop, so I've taught her some D&D, and we're talking about like games to teach her daughter, my niece, who's starting to become interested in them too. And so testing out those other systems is great. And it's also like for my parents who retired this past year, like tabletop keeps you sharp, and learning the games, and you're doing math, you're thinking about problems, you're developing empathy by thinking about how would somebody who's had these experiences treat this problem. It's a really cool thing to have in your life. I feel like it makes you, hopefully tabletop makes you a better person if you play it a certain way. I'm sure that the reverse is probably also true for some individuals, but I'm going to stay hopeful and say that if you play more tabletop, you'll probably gear towards better.
I think you're right. I think that the general tabletop does do exactly that for many, many, many people. Well, Justice, we're coming to the end of our time here, but if people want to find you on the internet, where should they go and what should they do?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Justice Arman. I also have a website that's www.justicearman.com. You can find me talking about games there, posting pictures of my Persian cooking, and general shit posting from time to time. So you'll see announcements of what I'm working on whenever the time comes.
Excellent. Well, it was great to have you here, Justice, and I'm looking forward to when we talk again and we see what you and Anthony have cooked up.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here, and thank you for your work on Arcadia as well.
All right. I'll see you around.
Oh,
All right. Yes.
we're talking 4E?
Here
Is that what we're
is-
doing? We're talking 4E, right?
You want to talk 4E, Rudy? We can talk
Hell
4E
yeah.
all day. All day.
You know it. You know it.
Everybody, this is Rudy Basso, author of I Cut Off Its Snout from Arcadia 11. Rudy is also just one of my dearest friends. We in college played a lot of 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons together. We had a podcast network together. And Rudy is also my Sunday Fun Time GM in my Knights Black Agents game,
Yes.
among many, many other things we have done together. So we did theater together. We've done all kinds of stuff. So Rudy,
We did
it's awesome to
musical
have you here.
theater together, yes.
We did. For people who don't know, what do you do in the wonderful world of role-playing games?
Yes, so I've mostly been on the kind of like new media side with podcasting and live streaming. I've done a little bit of design work for various companies. I've done some audiobook narration as well for different products. But this is my first like true foray into design work, and I chose something really weird for it. Yay!
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that stood out. We work on stuff in Arcadia. Arcadia is a chance to get weird, frankly. So let's talk about I Cut Off Its Snout. For people out there who maybe have not read Arcadia ever before, what is I Cut Off Its Snout?
Before we get there, James, I have to say, while I'm on Matthew Koval's channel, man, do I love Evolve, the game he worked on with Total Rock Studios. I think he was the lead writer. He was definitely super involved in all the story elements.
Yes.
But Evolve came out a week after I got laid off out of nowhere. So I was basically laying in my room staring at the ceiling. And then Evolve came out, and I played so much Evolve. And I love the gameplay of Evolve, but I also really love the story and all the characters. And like the moment before you drop, and they all have little lines where they talk to each other. And I know that Matt Koval was obviously super involved in all that. So I have to thank him for his work on Evolve. It really helped me out in a pretty crappy time in my life. So thank you, Matt. Evolve. Rest in peace. I miss you.
That's awesome. Yeah. Evolve is something that gets talked about a lot in the MCDM offices because Matt was the lead writer, but also a bunch of the people who are on the MCDM staff came from Turtle Rock Studios, and so I think Grace and I are the only people who didn't work on Evolve who currently work with MCDM. So
Well,
the
then
whole
I have to
office,
thank- Yeah, thank the office
yeah.
for me. Office, thank you.
I
if you're
will.
watching. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about I Cut Off Its Snout.
Yes.
It's got some Evolve-like elements in it. That's not true, really. It's about fighting monsters in a very...
Yeah.
You explain what the article is
Yeah.
to people.
So I love food, as if you've never met me, you can tell. So I always was surprised or a little disappointed that eating is kind of glossed over in our D&D games. Just having a hearty meal at the start of the day can give you the energy you need to slay monsters, etc. So I thought, well, we're killing all these monsters and beasts. Why not just take their body parts and eat them, as we do in real life? So I Cut Off Its Snout adds new rules to do exactly that. It adds 2 new skills, harvesting and cooking, or if you want, you could use survival, the survival skill, or cook's tools proficiency. And it allows you to harvest animal parts from dead animals, use those parts in combination with other kind of staple ingredients like flour and salt and other things you'd buy at a market. And like a cookbook, it lists a bunch of recipes. And when you cook and eat those recipes, you gain benefits from the monster. So if you've ever fought a monster and thought, whoa, this guy's doing something really cool, I wish I could do that. Well, now you can, because a lot of the monster abilities, there are no like PC equivalents. So now you finally get you can have the Tarrasque's legendary resistance BS. If you hate legendary resistance like me, now you too can say, sorry, DM. I resist that. So it's just another subsystem that you can tack onto your game if you've got someone in your gaming group that really loves food and really wants to introduce this. I think it's not difficult to just add on. And again, it's something your players will already be doing. You're already killing monsters, so why not just take off some of that sweet basilisk meat and make yourself a basilisk burger over the campfire?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that was so exciting to me about this was it's not just about cooking and eating monsters, right? It's a system for gaining the powers of monsters by consuming them. But it's also got rules for like preparing some normal meals too, right? Like a roast chicken or peas porridge.
Yeah.
That kind
so
of thing.
Obviously you don't always kill the specific monster. You're not killing basilisks left and right necessarily. So if you want just kind of like a morning peas porridge to kind of start your day, to give you those carbs that you need, to give you the energy, or if you want to have like a roast, if you want to kill like a wandering deer, you can do that, and it'll give you bonuses that aren't necessarily monster powers, but are still mechanical, like good mechanic stuff. I'm blanking off the top of my head, but it's a lot of like you can disengage without using a standard action kind of thing. A lot more basic kind of benefits for the players. Stuff that could always be useful to have in your back pocket. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I think also, many of the benefits are something that will be useful, but also not something that is going to necessarily break your game for those dishes that are more common, right?
Yes.
And then if you want something really cool, go kill a monster that can do something really cool, and you'll get its abilities.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is that there's tiers to how well, or the abilities themselves. So, depending on the recipe, there's always going to be a cooking DC. And if you roll 5 over, and if you succeed, you'll get a benefit. If you roll 5 over the cooking DC, the recipe is now delicious. Oh my goodness, excuse me. It's delicious. And there's a new benefit unlocked that you can choose if you prefer that. And if you roll a crit on your cooking check, then it is extra delicious. And you unlock a third, usually like super ability. So it's neat. It gives it a little bit of it's not quite always the same thing. Like there's a little bit of dynamic elements to it where this time, the Basilisk Burgers were even better, and we unlocked that second ability because of a really great roll. Or it makes crits more exciting, too, because you probably won't see many of those extra delicious benefits. So when someone actually does hit that 20 on a cooking check, it's pretty exciting. Everyone gets something really, really neat.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about that is I feel like D&D combat trains cheer when we see that 20 because of that critical hit, right?
Exactly.
But then we don't really see the benefit outside of anywhere else, and so it is cool to see that at play in this article. It was also great. You mentioned, right, everything being laid out as a recipe. Quick shout out to Sadie, who was
super
on the stream earlier.
Out to Sadie. Yes, not quick. Let's extend it. All right. Yeah, it looks. My article was like kind of. It was legible, but kind of messy to read. And because of her and her cookbook editor knowledge, it looks so good. I'm so happy with how it turned out.
It really is. And it's, I didn't realize these things about like cookbooks, or even really think about laying out the recipes in that
Yeah.
way. And that was Sadie's idea to like, hey, this is how it would look in a cookbook, and we could do it this way. And I'm like, oh, that's so genius, great idea. But this article is packed with like all sorts of other bits and bobs, right? So you've got the meat
Yes.
of the article. I'm going to make a food metaphor here.
Aha.
But then you've got all these great little side dishes, optional rules, feats, the extra hungry feat is in here. There's sort of a smorgasbord of mechanics and options in here. How do you view GMs using this? Do you think that yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I tried really hard when I was writing it to think, what are the questions any GM or anyone reading this might have when they're implementing these rules, which is why there are so many sidebars that are like, well, actually, if you want to do it this way, blah, blah, blah. So hopefully it isn't too difficult. Again, I think if you read this article and you're super inspired and you want to make this kind of like a touchstone for your campaign, then definitely I think adding cooking and harvesting adds another element to it that really fits that kind of theme. If you read it and are like, whoa, this sounds kind of new, kind of cool, I might want to try it out, then yeah, I would recommend slowly easing in by introducing survival instead of harvesting and cook's tools proficiency, which I don't think ever gets any use, honestly, in a normal D&D game without these rules. Like, can you think of a time when someone's broken out the cook's tools, James?
No, not
In
for
your
anything
game?
other than nothing other than like for joke or show.
Yeah,
probably.
just be like, I'm proficient in cook's tools. Well, we could have had a nature, proficiency, but cool, cook's tools. Like, so now you can actually use those cook's tools to benefit the entire group. So those would be my recommendations. But the last part of the article did include some kind of ideas if you want to make this your campaign, if you want a food-focused campaign. There were 3 kind of outlines I provided where maybe your party is running a restaurant, and here are some challenges that you might run into at the start, at the middle, and at the end of the campaign. Or maybe your party is running a food cart, which has its own very specific challenges that are way different than a brick and mortar restaurant. Or maybe you're like big game, like that was one of the things that appealed to me, is like we have all these monsters that are of different challenge ratings, that are of different difficulty to kill. What if your party is just like seeking out hunting these monsters down and bringing them back to this food black market, maybe, where you meet a certain fence who also sells gummies, who's interested in, maybe some expanding the menu, if you will. So maybe there's a way to really sync Arcadia 11 articles. There's some synergy there.
Yes, absolutely. It is. You can always find synergy among Arcadia articles if you look hard enough, which is great. We did get some questions for you, Rudy, on Patreon that people wanted to know. One question was for peas porridge, and I think you hinted at this. Peas porridge allows you to dash as a bonus action instead of a normal action.
Okay.
And the question was like, what was the idea behind that? Was it carbo loading?
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
I
think that might have been the first recipe second recipe I wrote. I'm like thinking of something that's truly like, what are they always eating in Game of Thrones when they're on the road? And it's like just a mush of lentils and stuff. So peas porridge was my idea, and it's like, well, that's really like something that you don't need to eat a lot of it. It really like gets you going. You have a bunch of carbs now. You can run faster. So yeah, I did try to theme some of the recipes that were just the staple recipes to also fit within what I thought would work nutritionally with the abilities they grant.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm glad you brought up Game of Thrones, because it did remind me of a point I wanted to make, which is that like The cool thing about this article is whenever I read a fantasy book, Game of Thrones is a huge one for this.
Sure.
They describe food for pages sometimes,
Yeah,
right?
for real. Yeah. I'm
And so
rereading the Witcher novels right now, which are great.
Oh,
Huge
yeah,
recommend. But there's this whole sequence in one of them where there's a group of them spend a ton of time like making a fish stew, like catching a fish, and like several pages are dedicated to the process of cooking that fish stew. And I'm like, yes, this is what I'm talking about while I'm reading it. Like, it's just exactly what I was thinking, is that there's these side conversations going on. There's all this other stuff. And the art in the article from Gustavo, the artist, there's this one piece that is that group of like partygoers just relaxing and messing around, and there it is. Yeah, having fun. That's one of my favorite parts, is that like Gnome is reenacting a little battle and the half-orc is loving it. And then in the background you can see we've got a dragonborn and a dwarf breaking down an owlbear that they've hung up and they're butchering. And like, that's what I wanted from this article. That's what, like, I want people to RP these moments too. I don't just want it to be, okay, roll the cooking check. I want, that's time where people can role play. You can make that work, and it works naturally. Just like the end of the day, like everyone cooling down and kind of getting ready for a meal. And yeah, I'm just I'm really happy with how everything turned out with the article. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a moment where you were talking about like cooking requires at least 1 hour of uninterrupted work, and during this time you give suggestions of what creatures like characters who aren't the cook might do, and one of them is hover annoyingly over the cook's shoulder. Which I think really gets to, yeah, it encourages that role play you're talking about. It really does.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
We do have another question here. This is a bit of a more serious question, and it's one that you and I discussed a lot, one that came up with the playtesters. Sort of what led to the introduction of cooking and harvesting as skills as being one of the options in this system, and like why did you think it warranted a new skill? So Joseph asked this on Patreon, and I believe just asked it also in our chat here on YouTube.
Yeah, so I think this is a hugely beneficial mechanic for players. I think that without some sort of hurdle, which is why I introduced these new skills, it's really, really easy for them to just go buck wild. If you're already like proficient, again, I joked about proficiency in cook's tools, but if you're already proficient in other skills that would utilize these, it might get a little frustrating as a dungeon master and mess with encounter balance, which is always difficult in 5th edition. I feel like making a perfect encounter. So that was my kind of way of saying, hey, it's going to take an additional buy-in from the players. Like, you're going to need to do something extra to unlock these abilities without stuff that you already have. So that was my thinking behind it. It'll cost money as well to buy some of the staple ingredients, but there's another 5e thing is, who knows what you do with your money. So this is hopefully a gold sink for party members. But that was my thinking, is that there needs to be some sort of buy-in from the players beyond what they already have to get all these bonuses. So I think that makes sense,
absolutely.
James?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And right, it's that idea of like you would choose these skills over other skills as part of that buy-in. Now, if you don't want it, that's why the option is in there, right?
Sure.
That you can use skills that already exist and go from there. But I am a fan of sort of this method because it does add this extra layer to the game and this extra thing that you can also do when you are battling creatures, which I think is cool, right? Like, there's this idea of like, oh boy, here comes a Hydra. Maybe we should run away. Oh, but hang on, let me flip through the recipe book. Like, oh, we can make something out of that. Like, maybe we stay and fight.
Yeah, that's a fun. And then like, how many heads do we want here? Because each one can give an additional benefit from the Hydra. Like, how long do we want to fight it? Yeah, that's a huge aspect of it. Is that's one of the things I love is yeah, just running into monsters and using something in game, like something that works within the world of the game as well. To be like, oh, gee, it would be someone breaking out a recipe book and being like, can we cook this? Do we have the other ingredients? Can we source those quickly before it goes bad? Kind of a thing. It's yeah, it's really neat.
Yeah. One thing, Rudy, that I sort of loved about this is you have a good understanding of game design because you've played a lot of games and you've read a lot of games and run and edited audio of a lot of different games. So I'm wondering if you could talk to people right now. Like our audience is a lot of people who love Dungeons and Dragons and love games and things like that. Do you have, outside of Dungeons and Dragons, do you have recommendations for other role-playing games that you think might be good for people who want to try something else?
Oh man. Well, taking it back to Evolve in game design, Matt Koval wrote a huge post-mortem on game design and why Evolve was so difficult to kind of cater to a lot of people and balancing and things like that I still think about to this day. And whenever I write anything, I think about, remember, it's basically like a butterfly effect. Any new, cool, unique mechanic you add to a game will cause huge waves to the rest of the game in different ways. So they were introducing new characters with these really neat, like this guy can bring people back to life. Okay, well, now we have to think about how that has an effect on the rest of the game. But in terms of role-playing games, some games that I think have really, really clever mechanics and work really well. I love Shadow of the Demon Lord. If you want to stick with fantasy,
sure.
I love its leveling system and proficiencies. I love Night's Black Agents in every Gumshoe game. What James alluded to our game earlier, but Gumshoe's really great because it doesn't block core clues, if that makes sense. Like your characters. So if you're playing, for example, a huge hulking half orc with intimidation, and your goal in D&D is to scare the halfling in the tavern to give up the information, and you come over with your big mean face and you roll the d20 for an intimidate check and you roll a 1, well, that kind of sucks. Like, that's my thing. This is what I do, but the dice have failed me. Night's Black Agent says, no, don't worry about that. Or Gumshoe games in general. You have these skills, you succeed automatically, there's no roll. And in fact, you're so good at it, if you spend a point in it, you get even more information from the halfling. So I think that's a really great way to approach role-playing games in general, and it's why I love writing for that system, is because it makes you, like, it makes you... It really keeps you on your feet as a dungeon master too, to kind of make those adjustments on the fly, because characters will always succeed. Does that answer your question? Those are two games that I really like.
Yeah, no, I think those are great, and honestly, it I see some of that. Some of your love of other role playing games is I feel like what gives you not just the courage, but the knowledge to be able to say, like, well, let's add this to D&D, right? Like, we'll figure out how it's going to work. I'm going to sit down here and do the work and everything, right? And it's how you also end up not just with, like, hey, here's a system for cooking in D&D, but here are, for each recipe, 3 different benefits that you might get and how you might get them. And here's the system for harvesting, and, oh, hey, if you want a feat, here's a feat. And, like, all that kind of stuff I see coming together. But even, like, that Gumshoe thing, it reminds me of, you have a recipe for Tarrasque Heart Tartar, my favorite, in here, and the DC for the check is 0. And when I asked you about this, do you remember what you said?
I mean, they already killed Tarrasque, so I'm not going to make them roll to cook it, I think is what I said, yeah.
Yeah, like, could you imagine how disappointing if you killed the Tarrasque, got hour, and we're like, fine, I'm gonna make this meal. I've been thinking about it for 20 levels of gameplay, and failed. So I was just like, oh wow, that is just beautiful. That is a thing that's happening. So it's great to see, and it is really, really great fun. Rudy, you also introduced me to video games. Do you see like a relation between video game design and tabletop game design?
I think there's a lot. It's funny, fourth edition. Speaking of fourth edition, a lot of people were like, "This is the World of Warcraft of tabletop games," or you think of a game like XCOM with its kind of tactical approach to combat and turns. So I do think there's a lot of crossover there. I think in terms of game design, yes. In terms of like adventure design, no, because you'll never know what players are going to do in role-playing games, right? There's never a set. You can't assume they're going to follow your set path. Like from an approach, you have to give like ways that it will wind back to the adventure path. I think core clues is a really great way to approach it, where this is something they'll need to know at some point. How they learn it, here are some possibilities. They hear that, they hear it from a specific NPC, or there's a rumor going around in the tavern about it, things like that. So I do think you can take a lot from video games, but it's always going to be like a different beast in terms of tabletop design versus video game design.
How much of your your real world experience as someone who really enjoys cooking as a hobby, right? How much of that do you think came into play in the article, in the sense of like how much of that expertise and knowledge that you have goes in? I should mention that my wife Bonnie is also someone who loves to cook, and she and Rudy often are talking to each other about like
we're rivals. She's my number one rival.
Yeah,
she is my Gary.
She's your rival
to Ash. Yeah, I think so. Right? We're not rivals.
Wow,
yeah, we're rivals. Bonnie.
Yeah, of course.
I mean,
does that
it
make
with
me
some of...
Professor Oak?
Yeah. Pokemon though, I want to eat those Krabbies. I'm all about eating those Krabbies. But I don't think there was too much. I think maybe for some of the recipe ideas, I imparted that. Obviously, the food staples, everything on that list can be in your pantry and will be great to have in your pantry, just in terms of recipe design. Yeah, I guess, yeah, like every recipe has its special, unique monster food, but then I had to make stuff around that, like side dishes, what have you. So I definitely pulled from just like cooking knowledge, or the few like fancy restaurants I've been to. What's fun, what's unique, what can I make work that would complement this like chul. Oh, well, it's like a crab, basically. So we'll do a chul bake or chul clam bake kind of thing. So I think, do you have the article open? What is it called? Chul bake?
I do.
Chul bake.
Chul boil.
Chul boil,
Chul boil.
Course. Like your classic crab boil.
Yeah. Now I do, there's one other thing I have to ask you about that I think was one of the things, the day that issue dropped, I saw a lot of people commenting with glee about this, about mimic tongue chowder. You have a note here about harvesting the mimic tongue. You have to do it. You have to harvest from a living mimic, because otherwise it devolves into an amorphous pile of goo when slain. How did you even think? Because it is like, correct that is what happens, right, when you slay a mimic. Were you just? How did that happen? How did you think of that?
I'm like, I don't know. This was the original pitch recipe I sent you. I think that ultimately comes down to me being like, man, I wish I had the powers of a mimic. And I thought, whoa, how would that work? Well, you'd have to eat a mimic to gain its powers. And then I was reading like, what is a mimic? And it's goo. It's a goo. It's an ooze. It's not a pleasant thing to eat, I would think. Unlike dessert, which would be delicious and is in the article.
That's true.
But
That's true.
yeah, I was thinking that would be an extra, and again, it was like a balance thing. That's really strong to be able to polymorph. So let's make it a little bit more difficult. You have to keep the animal alive and cut its tongue out before you can cook it. So I thought that would make a fun story as well. That's a big part of it, is like, what would make this an interesting story of how they cooked the mimic tongue chowder? Oh yeah, well, it was really fighting us, and the barbarian had to hold it down, and the rogue had some pincers, so he had to go in and pull it out. This sounds really dark all of a sudden, but mimics are evil, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure
absolutely.
they're evil. Yeah. Mimics are evil.
Well, it is. I mean, honestly, it was a pleasure to work on this with you. It's a pleasure to talk with you all the time.
Thank you, James, for the opportunity and being an amazing editor and partner on this. You're the best.
Well, thank you. Thanks for writing something really, really awesome, and for coming on and chatting with me. If people want to check out you, what you're doing, where should they go? What should they do?
So you can follow me on Twitter at Rudy Basso. I do tweet about food on occasion. I'm big into barbecue, and pizza is my thing now. I'm really into making pizza.
That's right.
I produce a podcast called Dames and Dragons, which is a 5e actual play. It's very silly. It's very fun. You can check more about that at damesanddragons.com. And then I also edit the WebDM Patreon podcast, and I'm on there occasionally as well. So if you're a fan of WebDM and you're on their Patreon, check out that podcast. I'm editing that. And then I want to say hey to my buddy Vin St. John also. Hi, Vin St. John.
Oh, yes. Vin St. John there in the chat.
Yes.
Very wonderful human who also did theater with Rudy and I in college.
Yes.
Rudy, thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you around. We're here at the end of our time.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. We're working on something that's a secret, I guess. Maybe we shouldn't talk about that.
We are working on a thing, so
projects.
Follow Rudy. Yeah, follow Rudy and me on Twitter, and you'll see it is a D&D 5e thing that is coming soon. Will be announced. Will be announced at some point. So we're almost done with the manuscript. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
And if you like Shakespeare,
Ooh.
or if you don't like Shakespeare, it's cool. It's fun. So yeah. Excellent.
Right. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Rudy. All right. And then there was me. Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching the stream and for having all kinds of great questions and encouragement for our Arcadia authors. We love them, and so it's see them here. We are maybe going to look at some different formats for this Q&A coming up, so keep your eyes peeled. We will be informing everybody about that as it happens, but in the meantime, new year here, so a couple of things that you should check out and get ready for. First, obviously, the Beast Heart came out, so if you didn't check that out, it's a new 5e class from us at MCDM. It also includes rules for companions at the table. Any character can have a companion. The Beast Heart is just the best at it. It also has 15 new companions in there, and we released 5 minis with that, and it sounds like at some point those minis will be restocked. So keep your eyes peeled for any announcements regarding restock of Beast Heart minis, but the PDF is available now. You can also get it on Fantasy Grounds. You can also get it on Roll20. And it's great. As well as, keep your eye peeled. We got this Monster Book Kickstarter coming soon to you. So more information on that as it comes. But I think there's a list on the MCDM website that you can go sign up for, and you'll be notified whenever that launches. But everybody, thank you a lot for watching. This is pretty cool that we went for 11 issues of Arcadia last year, and we also got out to everybody on the Patreon the Ill Rigor, and so it's just a real honor to be able to bring you all Arcadia every month, and I can't wait to show you what we have upcoming in 2022. Got some cool stuff coming at you next month. Looks like we're gonna have a 3 awesome 5e articles, one that's about nightmares, one that's about Fae of the Shadowfell, and one that is about getting cursed and turning into a monster and then undoing those curses as well. And then something a little special for those of you who play, let's say, original Dungeons and Dragons. We've got something, and we also have the 5e conversion for it as well coming your way. So there's, and that's just January. That's just what's next for Arcadia. We're gonna have a lot more coming in the coming months. I am neck deep right now in articles that I am reviewing and sending back to authors, and every single one of them is exciting. You'll see a lot of new things from us. I saw on the Reddit people clamoring for more options for martial characters, so you might see a couple of subclasses in the more martial vein, something a little monk, something a little fighter. You might see some rules for weapons made out of different materials. You might see a couple of magic weapons sprinkled in here and there for people, as well as I don't know, maybe some cool team-up maneuvers you can execute in combat with your friends. That, again, is just a taste of some of the things to come. So I think I'm probably going to leave it there. Thank you, everybody, again, for watching and for coming on, shouting out the authors. Thank you for reading Arcadia. If you haven't checked it out, highly recommend you do. Arcadia 11 is a great issue to jump on, and we'll see you later. Bye, everyone.